Ladies and gentlemen, some time ago, I met the man from whom I learned most of what I know about alcohol and alcoholism. His name was Walter Green, a doctor, a general practitioner from the Detroit area, who was also a recovered alcoholic. When he got well, he went back to the top of his profession, but he went back with this difference. He dedicated his life to alcoholic patients only, and he treated about 6,000 of them before he died. I submit for your consideration that he knew what he was talking about. He had the experiential knowledge of having been there himself. He had the loving clinical knowledge of his patients, and he had what I hope that you will be as impressed by as I was, a genius for simplicity and a marvelous grasp of the obvious. He was a genius in my book. And by way of beginning, the little doc used to present a picture of alcoholism itself. Alcoholism is one of the oldest diseases known. It's one of the most complex. We do not know what causes it. We know what causes drinking. We don't know what causes compulsive or alcoholic drinking. It's one of the most complete. It affects every single facet of the human being, body, mind, emotion, and soul. It is the most destructive. Most alcoholics die. And the disease affects seriously those who live with it. Paradoxically enough, it's the one about which we know the least. It's the one about which we know the least. Since most mistakes in judgment in this field result in tragedy, it only makes sense that what can be known should be known. And there is no field on earth in which there are more half-truths and myths and fallacies. One of the greatest myths is, let's send him to a doctor to find out why he drinks. And we believe that if a person knows why he drinks, the drinking problem will disappear. A knowledge of causes doesn't dissipate a problem, ladies and gentlemen. Proper therapy does. You may know why your tooth aches, but it'll still ache until you see a dentist. Alcoholism. There are a few things that we can know about it. What it is and what it does, based on a knowledge of alcohol, what it is and what it does. And that's where we will begin. There are reasons why people drink, and they're simple. But let's look at the reasons why people drink all of the things they drink. The first thing that touches human lips is water. Why do we drink it? We have to. It slakes thirst. The second is milk. And it is drunk for the simplest reason of all. We have to drink it, the maintenance of health. These two beverages are necessary. They're natural. But the human animal drinks a whole lot of other beverages, and he drinks them for different reasons. Usually when we're very young, we're introduced to something sweet, soda, soft drink, hot chocolate. And the reason is there's a preference for sweetness in the taste buds of the young. Try it, you'll like it. It is drunk to please a desire rather than fulfill a need. All right, now we come to coffee. This is the first beverage that contains a drug. It is different from these other three. We have to learn to drink coffee. It's a learned process. You acquire a taste for it. And you have to acquire a taste for it because it's not good and it doesn't taste good. Why do we drink it? Three reasons, each of which is very simple. Number one is curiosity. Custom dictates its use. Well, there's a social aspect to the drinking of coffee. It's called conviviality. And this can hardly be defined, but it is there. Gosh, Mom, did you see him talking all the while he was writing that big long word? Nothing to it, folks. Conviviality. You are not thirsty. A sip of water takes care of your thirst, but it happens to be the coffee break. Everybody's having one, you have one too. There is a social aspect to the drinking of coffee. Now, please, we come to alcohol. The drinking of which is also learned. Some learn a little quicker than others. Some drink it all their lives and never learn to like it. That's neither here nor there. Alcohol has been drunk for centuries. Why? Ladies and gentlemen, the reasons are many, but they're terribly simple. Number one is curiosity. Alcohol is a big people drink. Even legally, we're forbidden to drink until we reach a certain age. And so there's a whole lot of curiosity about it. And somewhere along the line, you take a little whiskey, you cut it with water, Put a little sugar in it to make it sweet. Put a little garbage in it to give it a little color. Take a sip, you're doing just what the big people do. It's customary to drink alcohol at births, deaths, weddings, wakes, celebrations, graduations, anniversaries, feast days, fast days, holy days, holidays, Sundays, Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays. Conviviality, it produces a whole lot more conviviality than coffee. It's called the social lubricant. Some people are easy to take when you oil them. Escape. Here's where the professional gets paranoid. He's drinking to escape. Ladies and gentlemen, to seek to escape the unpleasant by substituting the pleasant for it is the most natural thing on earth. Mankind's been doing it since the day he arrived here. When it gets cold, you put on a coat. You got a headache, you take an aspirin. It rains, you come in. Alcohol provides escape from certain other unpleasantries. Husbands, wives, kids, jobs, pain. It used to be taken to alleviate pain, but today we have a whole lot of better painkillers, so this is no longer a valid reason for drinking. I used to say if somebody shows up drunk at 8:30 in the morning, you ask him why, and he looks at you and says, receding gums. That ain't too good a reason. Here, ladies and gentlemen, is the main reason why everybody drinks beverage alcohol. One word: euphoria. You drink alcohol because it gives you a sense of well-being. Quite bluntly, you drink booze because it makes you feel good. And Lord, we've filled libraries with a whole lot of garbage trying to explain why people drink. My friends, it explains why you pay $2.50 for 3 ounces of martini instead of buying 8 bottles of root beer for the same price. 3 ounces versus what, 48, 72, 112 ounces? Doesn't make sense. Except one little old martini does what all the root beer in the world can't do. Makes you feel good. That's why we drink it. That's why we... Now, why do you want to feel good? Now you can fill psychiatric libraries. What is this magic elixir that makes people feel good that has caused them to drink it despite the bad taste for centuries? Basically, and bluntly, alcohol is a chemical composed of carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen, C2H5OH. That's no indication of my vast knowledge of chemistry. I know about as much as you do. H2O is water. I've come to learn that K9P emanates from the south end of a dog, and that's about all the chemistry I know. But the reason this is put up here is just to show what it's made of. Alcohol is digested, oxidized, burned up by the liver, and it does so at the rate of 3/4 of an ounce an hour. And ladies and gentlemen, you can neither accelerate nor decelerate that process. So there's no such thing as a hangover cure. The only thing you get when you give black coffee to a drunk is a wide-awake drunk. Alcohol is a solvent, an irritant. It's been called a stimulant. It's an antiseptic and an anesthetic. Now, please, it is a solvent. It's a good one. It's been known to remove lots of things. Stains from tables, stomachs, paychecks, bankrolls, careers, jobs, families, marriages, and lives. It's the best solvent on earth. It's an irritant. Cut yourself, spill a little alcohol on the cut, you will rise again. It is not a stimulant, but we believe it to be so because of the wacky things people do when they drink it. We'll see that later. It's an antiseptic. A nurse will purify your arm with a little rubbing alcohol before she gives you a needle. And for centuries, the only anesthetic that we had. Basically, in its drinkable form, alcohol is a sedative drug. Alcoholism is addiction to that drug. My friends, that's this whole talk in one sentence. Alcohol is a drug, alcoholism is addiction to it. What is addiction? It is a phenomenon characterized by 2 things. Number 1 is compulsive use. Quite bluntly, the alcoholic, along with all other addicts, uses the way he uses because he can't not use that way. Alcoholism has nothing to do with willpower. If alcoholism were a question of willpower, there wouldn't be any alcoholics. Number 2, progression. And this is the weird phenomenon that I will simply state and then we will comment about it later, because there's no such thing as proof or explanation or anything else. We'll simply comment on it. What does progression mean? It means, again, in spite of so-called scientific research and experimentation, once contracted, it lasts until death. And it gets worse until death. As I said, we'll just comment on that later. Right now, let's go back to sedative. That is a statement. How do we prove it? Dr. Green shows the sedative properties of alcohol by comparing its action with that of another accepted anesthetic drug, ether. Now, I don't know what we all know about ether, but I think we would all accept the fact that an anesthetized rabbit could be referred to as the ether bunny. I apologize for that and will not do it again. Ether is an anesthetic that acts on the brain and puts it to sleep by interfering with its oxygen supply. The brain is an organ composed of parts that control functions. The outermost part of the brain is the seat of reason, judgment, intellect. Beneath that is your emotions, your imagination, your memory. Deeper still, the motor activity, the movement of arms and legs, your sense of coordination. And then some refinements of that, the semi-voluntary and involuntary actions. Semi-voluntary, the blinking of your eyes. At times you can control it, and at times you don't. A gust of wind, you blink. The purely involuntary functions would be the action of your stomach and your intestines in their work of digestion, the digestion of food. The innermost, smallest, most protected part of the brain houses those functions that are absolutely essential to life. The Latin word for life, as you know, is vita. What is essential to life is therefore vital. Your vital functions are your heartbeat and your breathing. Doc Green says, let's take a normal adult and drug him with ether, then we'll do the same thing with alcohol. What's a normal adult? According to Doc Green, an adult is someone who functions according to the formula I over E. Intellect controls emotions. Aquinas calls us rational animals. I over E, intellect over emotions. Now please, let's see what happens to that formula when the brain that controls it gets drugged. First of all, there is a physical reaction of dryness in the throat. Ether is highly absorbent of moisture, and it dries out the mucous membranes of the throat. If you've ever undergone surgery by ether, you've noticed after 1 or 2 inhalations, you get that very vague sensation of suffocating. You want to rip the mask off and gulp fresh air. But before you can, you feel good. Whee! You know why you feel good? Ladies and gentlemen, it's almost mathematical. Watch what happens when ether gets to the brain. It hits the first part that is vulnerable. Intellect. Reason goes out the window. Watch the formula. It's I over E except after D. Add the drug. Knock out reason. Liberate the emotions. You have a reversal of the formula and enter an excitement stage. Quite bluntly, you feel good because ether just put to sleep what would make you feel bad. Reason. You see, the problem is still there. You're going to be operated on, but it doesn't bother you. The excitement stage. When the emotions come out, this is important. When the emotions come out, they come out drug affected. You see, that's the next part of the brain that gets hit. You are not watching emotional behavior here, you are watching drugged emotional behavior. Supposing, for example, you walk into an operating room and there's your mother and she's babbling. Let's stop the anesthetic here. Here's your mother babbling. How many of you would say, good heavens, she needs a psychiatrist? Does that make sense? Just bear that in mind for 1 minute. You may or may not feel sick. The next part of the brain that gets hit is what controls your motor activity. Watch, please. You're not in your right mind. You're not in your right emotions. You're not in your right body. You're in an excitement stage with the danger of sickness. These are dangerous. They shoot you right through them. That, ladies and gentlemen, is why that sheet is wrapped rather tightly around you. That's why they're standing there, and that's why they zoom you right through this. When the semi-voluntary functions go, you're unconscious. They don't call it simple unconsciousness. They call it pre-anesthesia. It means you're out, but you can't yet be operated on. You would hurt. When the involuntary functions go, you're anesthetized. Anesthesia is a comatose state, leaving you with your vital functions, and that's it. And ladies and gentlemen, when they go, you do. Death is the next step. That's why it's a very dangerous thing. That's why anesthesiologists are specialists who do nothing but that. Coming out of it, you go through the same process in reverse. You go from anesthesia to pre-anesthesia, you'd be sick, you'd be sick, and you undergo an excitement stage. Now, obviously, there's not going to be any euphoria. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the comparison. All you have to do is cross out ether and write down alcohol. It does exactly the same thing. They don't act alike. They do exactly the same thing, and this is a chemical reason why. Now let's go back to that formula. C2H5OH, that's alcohol. Ether is two of them, HOC2H5. They've got two molecules of alcohol without, however, the water. They take the H2O out. As I've said a couple of thousand times, ether is a double shot without a chaser. Of course they do the same thing. Ladies and gentlemen, they can't not do the same thing. They're composed of carbon, oxygen, hydrogen. The only thing different is the molecular structure. Now please, let's watch the action of alcohol on the brain. Remember your first shot? There was a burning sensation. I'm talking about straight whiskey, not the beer and wine. You're holding one, you've heard about it, now you got one. That was good. And the cheers are coming down. What happened? The first paradox about alcohol, it's a liquid that dries out your throat. See, it's two things. Number one, it's highly absorbent of moisture, and it dries out, the mucous membranes of the throat. It's also an irritant. It burns on the way down. Feels like you're swallowing ground glass. Your first drink was not a taste, it was a sensation. Now please, that's why we take the chaser, to alleviate that burning. Now you begin to feel euphoria, because this is what happens. Alcohol is handled at the rate of 3/4 of an ounce an hour. It's handled by the liver. Now you're going to find 3/4 of an ounce of alcohol in about a shot and a half of 100 proof whiskey. Suppose you drink 6 of them in an hour. The liver handles 1. The rest get into the bloodstream for subsequent trips. The blood, in its coursings, brings the alcohol to the brain. And when the alcohol gets to the brain, it begins to sedate it. The brilliance of Dr. Green. He says, how do we know? Simple observation. Don't you know when you're in the presence of somebody drinking? You notice it in the motor activity, and you notice it in the emotional behavior. If somebody's very drunk, he staggers. But in the beginning, you see the faint slowness of the blinking of the eyelids. And after a while, the tongue begins to get a little bit thick. Notice somebody stand in front of his wife. She says, you've been drinking. He said, She says, you've been drinking. He said, how can you stand there with your face hanging out that way and accuse me of drinking? He thinks he's functioning normally. Now you think you function normally when you drink. You feel good because alcohol puts to sleep what would make you feel bad. You feel good because after a drink or two, the worrywart begins to go to sleep. And so, my friends, it's I over E, except after drug alcohol. Add alcohol to the formula, knock out the worrywart, and liberate the emotions. Now do you know why the guy smiled when he said the rent's due? The problem was there, but it doesn't bother him. The worrywart's out of the picture. And this is why we do wacky things when we drink. Reason is gone. Now please, this is important. When the emotions come out, they come out drug affected. You are not watching emotional behavior in a drinker. You are watching drugged emotional behavior. Now why is this important for the alcoholic? Now let's look at the alcoholic. All of this stuff, ladies and gentlemen, doesn't have to do with alcoholism. It has to do with anybody that drinks alcohol. But for the moment, now let's go to the alcoholic. He lives that way. He lives that way because he's been drugging his brain with too much too often for 18 years. And we look at him and we see the wacky behavior. Good heavens, he was told if he came in drinking he'd be fired, and he came in drunk. So we sent him to a psychiatrist because he's acting crazy. Ladies and gentlemen, these are Dr. Green's findings about alcoholics. In the initial stages of recovery, psychiatric treatment is contraindicated. He needs to be gotten sober first. Now let's go back to your mother on the operating table. I'm just going to ask you one simple question. How would you know if your mother needed psychiatric or professional care for her emotional problems? Wouldn't you say, get the ether out of her first so you can evaluate her? That's all we do with alcoholics. Get them sober first. Do some alcoholics need professional help after they get sober? Yes. Doc Green, you say if you were nuts before you started to drink, you'll be wackier after you quit. Certainly you'll need help. But guess what he found out? The percentage of alcoholics who needs help is exactly the same as the percentage of the non-alcoholic population. Which proves that even though there are psychological beginnings to drinking, those causes have nothing to do with the alcoholism. Alcoholism is biochemical. These things are way in the background. Quite bluntly, ladies and gentlemen, most professionals put the cart before the horse. All these so-called causes are nothing but the results. The guy's acting like a fruitcake because he's been drugged for 18 years. All I'm saying is this. In the initial stages, you don't use that sort of therapy. You get the alcoholic sober first. Then you give him what he needs. The excitement stage manifests itself in many, many different ways. Whatever you are in your emotional makeup will come out drugged, exaggerated. Now, what kind of a drinker or drunk are you? There are 4 basic types and hundreds of variations on the theme. There's the jocose type, the bellicose type, the lachrymose type. They're big old Latin and Greek words, but I'm sure you can all figure this one out, the amorose type. The good-natured slob, he's very shy, but after 6 drinks he's standing on a piano telling jokes. Whee! The bellicose type is usually a little guy about 4'2". He weighs 98 pounds and he's afraid of the dark, but get him drunk, he'll take on the whole world. You dirty rat. In treatment, you can spot these guys right off the bat, the new men with the new teeth. Then there's the lachrymose or crying drunk. We won't even go into him. I used to spend 20 minutes on that, but you've all met a crying drunk. And then there's the lover. Ladies and gentlemen, even Shakespeare has in one of his plays the fact of alcohol being a sexual suppressant. Alcohol is a drug. It reduces sexual potency. It doesn't stimulate. What it actually does is paradoxical. It knocks out control over what's already there. But in the alcoholic family, the sexual problems are unbelievable. The promise and the performance are usually 2 different things, and Shakespeare said that. Comes home with blood in his eye and passes out at the head of the stairs. Or if he stays awake long enough to get into bed, she usually has to go to bed with a drunken pig. And the problems over the years are unbelievable. You may or may not get sick, and if you drink enough, you will pass out. This is not blackout, it's passing out, unconsciousness. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the paradoxes of alcohol. It's a liquid that dries out your throat. It's a sedative that seems to stimulate because you enter an excitement stage. And it's an anesthetic that even though it does not anesthetize. It's a liquid. And once you drink enough to pass out, you can't pick up the glass to swallow anymore. Theoretically, you could drink enough in the beginning to slam you down there, but it's also liable to slam you down here. And if, of course, you sedate the vital functions, the result is obvious: death. Alcohol does and can kill. However, coming out from under the influence of alcohol, you go through the same process in reverse as you did going in. You go from anesthesia to pre-anesthesia, you'll be sick, and you undergo an excitement stage. There will be no euphoria because of the so-called hangover symptom. All right. Now let's look at 2 people who go through this process. One's an alcoholic and one is not. Charlie and his Aunt Mabel go to a New Year's Eve party. Charlie's the alcoholic. He shows up, he burns his throat, he feels good. For a while he's the loving life of the party, changes into filthy McNasty. Somebody hits him in the mouth, he cries in his beer and passes out at 20 minutes of 12. He came to see the New Year in, but he hadn't seen the New Year in 4 years. He's unconscious at midnight. That's not by choice. He determined to see the New Year in, but he suffers compulsion. He drinks more than he intended to. He shoots through euphoria and winds up unconscious. Now please, let's look at Aunt Mabel. Aunt Mabel doesn't drink at all because he does. Aunt Mabel's the old moralistic shrew in the family. There's one somewhere, everywhere. Maybe you know one. She gives you the impression God went on vacation and appointed her to fill in. Mabel is strong-willed. Mabel wakes up in the morning, looks at her hair in the mirror, and says, "Part," and it does. You know the kind. Now, Mabel doesn't drink, but they offer her a glass of orange juice. She says, okay. So they give her a little orange juice, one ice cube, and they fill the glass with vodka. And 3/4 of the way through the glass, old Mabel's head is down on the table. What's the difference between Mabel and Charlie? The next morning, Charlie's going to wake up and reach for a bottle. He'll bite off about 4 ounces before he leaves bed to go to the bathroom so he won't commit suicide when he shaves. And poor old Mabel doesn't know she's had a drink to start with. What's the difference between Charlie and Charlie's aunt? What is an alcoholic? Ladies and gentlemen, there are as many definitions of alcoholics as there are people. And everyone can define an alcoholic. Well, an alcoholic is a former corporation lawyer who's down on Skid Row bumming nickels. Congratulations. I wonder if you could have spotted him 18 years ago when he was wearing $500 silk suits. But the symptoms were still there. What is the alcoholic? My definition of alcoholic is one whose drinking is causing problems. All alcoholics, as a base for their disease, drink too much. Wasn't that brilliant? Excessive drinking. But ladies and gentlemen, there are a lot of non-alcoholics who abuse alcohol and drink excessively. The difference is that the alcoholic usually does. He has an excessive drinking pattern. Now please, what is excessive? How much is too much? That amount is excessive, which causes trouble. That's too much. Now, like what trouble? The following list of things are the results of excessive drinking and are therefore the symptoms of alcoholism. Number 1, the blackout. By definition, a blackout is present inability to recall something done recently under the influence. You can remember graduating from grammar school and can't remember driving the car home last night. That's a blackout. A normal drinker would be frightened to death of such a thing. Alcoholics do this all the time. Number 2, gulping and sneaking drinks. Hey, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, if you want a thumbnail little old question to diagnose alcoholism, one question. Do normal drinkers do this? If your answer is no, you're talking about abnormalcy. If any of you men were to go home tonight and see your wife sneak out of the dining room, go into the bathroom, open the toilet tank, pull out a bottle of milk and drink 3 shots, you'd have her committed in 2 minutes. Normal people don't do that. And yet we watch alcoholics drink that way and we think it's kind of ordinary. Have you ever embarrassed someone sneaking a drink? You walk in the kitchen, he's got a great big hooker, it's going, "Hi, Henry." "Hi, how are you?" He doesn't know what to do with it. It weighs a ton. Ladies and gentlemen, normal people don't get embarrassed taking a drink. Loss of control. This is the biggie. It indicates compulsion. It indicates compulsion. Have you ever drunk more than you determined you were going to drink? That's loss of control. And if your answer is yes more than once, you'd better look at your drinking. Now, however, when somebody asks us about that, the old alcoholic has an alibi system to choke a horse. You know what an alibi is? It's an unreasonable reason for doing something. What'd you get drunk last Thursday for? It rained. How about Saturday? It didn't. How about last Sunday? The Colts won. How about the week before? They lost. It's the dog's birthday. Every alcoholic has a 900-year-old dog. He has a birthday every 3 weeks. The eye opener. The eye opener is the need of a drink after a period of deprivation, which is usually after sleep, so the eye opener usually occurs in the morning. But did you notice I didn't call it the morning drink? The alcoholic, in order to alibi his way out of things, will stay away from a drink until noon. He'll shake to pieces. So he can say, well, I didn't drink till noon. He also didn't get up till noon, but he doesn't look at that. Drinking alone. The alcoholic drinks alone to hide the frequency and the amount. I don't want you to know I drink as much as I do, as often as I do, so I drink where you can't see me. The office drinker who goes into the lavatory to drink. All you have to do is ask your question. Do normal drinkers drink in the toilet? Usually not. Change the pattern. I've got to do something about my drinking, so he switches. He changes the pattern. He switches from bourbon to rye. From rye to vodka. From vodka to beer. It is always from one alcoholic beverage to another. And then this one that has killed people. Why don't you just drink beer? Beer never hurt anybody. Ladies and gentlemen, the addiction is to alcohol, not the clothing it wears. You know the difference between a beer alcoholic and a whiskey alcoholic? The amount of alcohol you find in a 12-ounce bottle of beer is exactly what you find in a 1-ounce shot of whiskey. The difference is obvious. You've got to drink more beer to get it. You've got to go to the bathroom more often and it ain't worth it. It's all about a fellow ordered a bottle of beer in a bar and went to the bathroom, dumped it down to John. Somebody asked him what was wrong, if he had lost his mind. He said, no, he's just tired of being the middleman. Antisocial behavior. Just listen to this line, see if you've ever heard it, see if you've ever used it. He's a wonderful fellow. When he's sober. Antisocial behavior is characteristic of the alcoholic. Okay? Antisocial behavior has results. Loss of friends, jobs, and families. An alcoholic is one whose drinking causes problems. And the family usually suffers. The friends disappear from the whole family because to take the family, you got to take him. And when he comes, there's always a fight, so don't invite them. Jobs. I do my job better drinking than any 5 men sober. And the only thing you can say to a man like that is, keep drinking. And families. Ladies and gentlemen, I've said this 1,000 times too. The effect on families is unbelievable. School begins very shortly. And every noon, bells will ring in schools just like this one, and the kids will go down to the cafeteria to eat lunch. And at any given table, there's one kid with his face down in the soup saying nothing while they're all talking about what happened last night. Some game, some show, whatever. He's saying nothing. Guess what happened in his home last night? He lay in bed shaking, listening to his father calling his mother a goddamn whore in the middle of a drunken rage, and he's been raised on this. Now who's he share this with? Not a soul. He just keeps it in and gets sicker. And that kid, if he ever touches alcohol, is practically a sitting duck for alcoholism himself. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll just mention that because it demands hours of talking for itself. Now please, doctors and hospitals. The alcohol is beginning to butcher the body now. And so it's in and out of hospitals. And he still is blind. He can't see what his 3-year-old can see. It's nerves, it's the stomach, it's anything but the drinking. You know how we've treated alcoholics? The professional goes after what he thinks are the causes of alcoholism, and they're not. They're the cause of his drinking. Inferiority complex, fear of authority, death in the family, shyness, whatever. The social worker goes after the effects. You know, feed the family, clothe the family, get him another job. Meanwhile, he's drinking himself to death. 2 men 40 years ago finally came along and said, let's stop the drinking. Now he's scared. The doctor says, you have cirrhosis, drink again and you'll die. So he stays sober for 14 years. And then he drinks again. Now, friends, we're going to discuss this little old thing right here, progression. Alcoholism progresses whether you drink or not. And after 14 years of sobriety, the alcoholic picks up a drink, and a week later he finds himself on a binge and a bender, and he wonders what hit him. No one can explain that. It is a simple truth. The only answer to alcoholism is total, complete abstinence. And that's why all these programs of research trying to make alcoholics drink again is going to kill them. I'm a man. I can handle a beer. I have 14 years of sobriety, so he does. He handles a beer. And the next day he handles a beer. And the next day he handles a beer. But 3 days later he handles 4 beers. And 2 days later, he's handling 6 shots. And a week later, 4 quarts handles him. At the punch bowl's brink, let the thirsty think what they say in Japan. First the man takes a drink, then the drink takes a drink, then the drink takes the man. When an alcoholic drinks again after a prolonged stretch of sobriety, he does not pick up where he left off. In a relatively short time, he picks up where he would have been if he had been drinking all that time. Why? God knows, and he won't tell. Tremors is an infallible sign of physical addiction. This is the inner tremors where every fiber of your being screams for a drink. Ladies and gentlemen, the alcoholic doesn't get euphoria. He gets 10 seconds of euphoria and then 3 weeks of trying to stay alive. He works to drink, and drinking is work. That's why alcoholics lie to you. Alcohol is more important than breath. If they were to tell the truth, you'd tell them to quit, and they know they can't quit. They need alcohol to live. And so, Doc Green used to say, this indicates a positive cellular craving for the drug without which he cannot now operate normally. So it's protect the supply. Keep the bartender paid. Hide the bottle. If you know somebody hides bottles, you know an alcoholic. And you see how far down the line it is, don't you? 14, unreasonable resentments. Unreasonable resentments. Ladies and gentlemen, if you were to walk down the street and somebody punched you in the nose and you didn't resent it, you'd be numb between the ears. But an alcoholic will walk downstairs, mumble good morning, his wife doesn't hear him, so she doesn't respond. 3 weeks later, he hits her in the head with a shotgun handle. That's unreasonable. Alcoholics live that way. And when you live with them, you can't cope with this. Unreasonable resentments. The wife says, if I say yes, I'm wrong. If I say no, I'm wrong. I'm damned if I do, I'm damned if I don't. Nameless fears and anxieties. This disease teaches its victims one single thing. It's the only thing alcoholics learn from their illness. That's how to be scared to death. Ladies and gentlemen, they're afraid to live and they're afraid to die. They're just afraid. Till you come to the end of the line, the collapse of the alibi system. You know what that means? It means that if he's lucky, the alcoholic reaches his moment of truth. He looks into the mirror of himself and sees what is there instead of what he wants to be there. He sees what everybody else has been looking at. He says, I did not get drunk last night because it rained or because it didn't rain. I don't know what the weather was. It's not her big mouth, she's gone. The Colts neither won nor lost, they didn't play. The dog is dead. I did not intend to drink and I got drunk. I have a drinking problem. Now he can respond to help. You see, if the poor alcoholic surrenders to his addiction, he winds up incarcerated, insane, or dead, or he can surrender to help. The only help that I know of that really works, and it works best for most, is a phenomenon called AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. It contains 12 steps of therapy out of the pit. But ladies and gentlemen, I believe God gave us the science of medicine for sick bodies, psychiatry for sick minds, psychology for jumbled emotions. I believe we have dentists for bad teeth, and I believe He gave us AA for alcoholism. It's what works best for most. Now please, I have said most of what I intend to say tonight. But it would be grossly incomplete and unjust of me to leave without asking one single question to dispel forevermore a crazy myth that we have labored under and that has resulted in hundreds of thousands of alcoholic deaths. Is it true that you cannot help an alcoholic unless he wants help? That's a lie. It's a myth. It's completely unjust. Don't hand me this, you can lead horses to water and not make them drink. I know that. But you can lead them to a well and make them thirsty. And that's what we do when we coerce an alcoholic into treatment. We offer him something to respond to. And if the treatment is good, he will probably respond. Ladies and gentlemen, I over E plus alcohol equals the insanity of the alcoholic. Do you know what the insanity of the alcoholic is? He consumes a chemical that is killing him. Now watch this real simple formula. E over I, the insanity of alcoholism, plus AA is a restoration to sanity. He now functions normally again. He doesn't drink. My friends, I thank you for being here. I thank you for listening to me. And the prayer that I leave on is this. If any of you has a drinking problem, I hope to God I just spoiled your drinking for you. Good night.